What we're talking about today is Lesson 90, adding and subtracting rational expressions. When adding and subtracting rational expressions, you follow the same rules as adding and subtracting fractions, which means that we must find common denominators. We cannot add or subtract without a denominator. So, for example, if I wanted to add 2/3 and 4/7, they're saying a common denominator would be 21. So to get 21 on the first one, I multiply by 7 top and bottom. To get 21 on the second one, I multiply by 3 top and bottom. So 2 times 7 is 14, 3 times 7 is 21, plus 4 times 3 is 12, over 7 times 3 is 21. I can now add those numerators. The denominator does not change, it stays the same. So it says, add or subtract, simplify your answers. So looking at this, it wants me to add them. Do I have common denominators? I have 4y squared, 4y squared. That means yes. So I have 7y plus 3y gives me, 10y over 4y squared. But it says to simplify my answers. So on the top and the bottom I can divide by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 4 divided by 2 is 2. This is y to the first over y to the second. I'll move the smaller one down and subtract it, following my same exponent rules, which leaves me with just a 5 on top over 2y. Final answer. I would like for you to try and do B on your own paper. Please, if you could please pause the video at this time to give them a chance to work on that. On B, this one is a little bit trickier because we're subtracting, and we're not just subtracting one, we're subtracting this whole quantity here, okay? Which means I'm going to have to distribute that negative over. So what I actually have is 21 plus 3g minus 1, negative negative gives me a positive g, all over 5 plus g because it's a common denominator, and the denominator does not change when I'm adding or subtracting fractions. On top, I can now combine any like terms. So I see that 21 and negative 1 are like terms, and 3g and g are like terms. So 21 minus 1 gives me 20. 3g plus g gives me 4g, all over 5 plus g. Okay? To simplify this, I can go ahead and divide out a 4 out of both of these. So if I factor out a 4, 20 divided by 4 is 5. Plus 4 divided by 4 is 1, so just g, all over 5 plus g, which is a quantity also. Those are exactly the same, so that means my final answer is 4. On example 2, it wants us to add or subtract, simplify our answer. Now on this one, I don't have a common denominator, okay? I have 5 and 10, I have x to the third and x. So I want to have it exactly the same. So for the numbers, for my coefficients, to make this 5 into a 10, I need to multiply it by 2. And to make this x to the first and x to the third, I need to multiply it by x to the second. So over here, I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2. And over here, I'm going to multiply by x squared over x squared. Okay, so when I do that, 2 times 1 is 2 over 2 times 5, x to the third is 10x to the third, plus 4x times x squared gives me 4x to the third, over 10x to the first times x to the second gives me 10x to the third. Now I have a common denominator, okay? So I can write these together as 2 plus 4x to the third, all over 10x to the third. And I can simplify it a little bit by factoring on top. I can factor out a 2, which leaves me with 1 plus 2x to the third, all over 10x to the third. I can reduce this by 2. I can reduce this by 2. So my final answer is 1 plus 2x to the third, all over 5x to the third. Okay? On example 3, okay, it wants us to subtract and simplify our answer. So again, on this one I have to recognize that I'm subtracting this whole quantity, but I don't have a common denominator yet. And remember, anytime we see trinomial, the first thing that we think should be to factor. So this is a trinomial that has a coefficient of 1. So all we have to do is find something that multiplies to get this, adds to get this. So I'm going to rewrite my problem minus that, whoops, x plus 5. Eraser. X plus 5 over, and I know I'm factoring this trinomial, so I'm going to set up my two sets of parentheses. I'm going to split up my x squared into x times x. I know I'm multiplying to get a negative, so I have to have opposite signs, one positive, one negative. Things that multiply to get me a 9 are 1 and 9, and 3 and 3. Of those, to get a positive 8, I'm going to have to use the 1 and 9. Because the 8's positive, I want my bigger number to be positive, so I'm going to have a positive 9 and a negative 1. Okay, now that I'm here, I see that I have negative x minus 1 in both denominators, right? But I don't have it over here right now. So what I have to do is I have to multiply by that quantity of x plus 9 on top and bottom. Okay, so when I do that, here, I'm going to have x plus 9 times x plus 3 minus all of this. Okay, so I'm going to write x plus 5 in parentheses still, I haven't distributed it yet, all over my common denominator of x plus 9, x minus 1. Okay, it wants me to simplify, so on top, I'm going to FOIL. First times first, I'm going to get me x squared. Outside times outside gets me positive 3x. Inside times inside gives me 9x. Last times last gets me a positive 27. And then I'm going to go ahead and distribute this negative. So I have minus x minus 5 all over my common denominator of x plus 9 times x minus 1. Okay, combine like terms on top. I have 3x plus 9x minus x. And then I have 27 minus 5. So I have x squared still. 3x plus 9x is 12x. Minus an x is 11x. And then 27 minus 5 gives me a 22 over that common denominator of x plus 9, x minus 1. Now, you might think that we're done here, but it's probably a good idea for us to try and factor this trinomial, because remember, when we see a trinomial, we have to think to factor. So I'm going to split up my parentheses, split x squared into x times x. I need something that multiplies to get 22 and adds to get 11. So things that multiply to get 22 are 1 and 22 and 2 and 11. Okay, I would have to have a positive and a positive, and are either of these going to get me an 11? The answer to that is no. Okay, so if it will not factor, which this one won't, this is my final answer. Example 4 says to add and simplify. And what they're trying to do here is trick you into thinking that you do have a common denominator, but really you don't. Because here you have a positive a, and here you have a negative a. And on this one you have negative 3, here you have a positive 3. So a way to change that very quickly would be to multiply by negative 1 over negative 1 on the first one, because it's going to change my signs. Negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. And then when I distribute this negative 1 to this quantity, okay, negative 1 times a is negative a, negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3, plus that 4a over 3 minus a. I can rewrite this to look the same, okay, which would be negative 6 over 3 minus a. All I did was switch the position. If I have 3 and then my negative goes with my a, plus 4a over that 3 minus a. I now have a common denominator, so I have negative 6 plus 4a over my common denominator of 3 minus a. And now I can factor out on top. I could factor out a negative 2. If I take out negative 2, I'm left with 3 minus 2a all over 3 minus a. those quantities are not the same, so I can just leave it as it is. Final answer. The force Sarah exerts when paddling a canoe causes it to travel at an average rate of 2 miles per hour. She paddles 8 miles upstream, turns around, and paddles 4 miles downstream. Write and simplify an expression for the total time Sarah is paddling, assuming that the current speed c remains constant. What we have to realize here is that we're using distance, rate, and time. Okay, so that's always d equals rt. But in this case, it's wanting us to find the total time. So let's solve for t here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get r by itself, not r, t by itself by dividing by r on both sides, which gives me that t is equal to d over r. Well, it says that she paddles upstream. Well, I just changed my color of my pen. Okay, so upstream, her time is going to be equal to her distance, which is 8 miles, over her rate, okay, and it says her average rate is 2 miles per hour. So I know it's going to be 2, but I also have to think about the current speed, okay? So if she's traveling upstream, she's traveling against the current, which is going to be that we're subtracting that c, okay, because she's not going to be going as fast if she's traveling against the current. If she's going downstream, her time is going to be equal to her distance, which it says she turns around and paddles 4 miles downstream. It's going to be 4 over her speed that she paddles, which is an average of 2 miles per hour, plus the speed of the current. Okay? So it wants us to write and simplify an expression for the total time. Total time means that we're going to add these two things. So I have a over 2 minus c plus 4 over 2 plus c. Okay, on this one we can't just divide by -1 because the 2 is positive in both of these. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to multiply by the opposite denominator for each fraction. So on the first fraction, I'm going to multiply by 2 plus c over 2 plus c. And on the second fraction, I'm going to multiply by 2 minus c over 2 minus c. Okay? So for the first one, I have that 8 times 2 plus c, and then the second one I have 4 times 2 minus c, and that's all going to be over my common denominator, which is 2 plus c times 2 minus c. So I can do some simplifying now. I'm going to distribute my 8, distribute my 4. So I have 8 times 2 is 16 plus 8c, and then plus 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times negative c is minus 4c. All over my common denominator, 2 plus c times 2 minus c. Like terms, on top I have 16 plus 8, and then I have 8c minus 4c. 16 plus 8, that's going to give me 24, and I have 8c minus 4c gives me 4c over my common denominator of 2 plus c over 2 minus c. I can factor out here a 4 from both of these. So if I take out a 4, I'm left with 6 plus c over my denominator of 2 plus c times 2 minus c. And that is her time. Okay? Simplified final answer. That is all I have for you today. Your homework is going to be, not this, that is not correct. It is lesson 90. You're going to do the practice set A through G and 1 through 23 odd. This is your last textbook assignment for the school year. Please make sure that you're taking your time and enjoying it because I know you're going to miss it for next year. That's it. Have a good rest of the day.